This is a historic day as Ruth Bader Ginsburg becomes the first woman to lie in state in the U.S. Capitol. Her casket arrived this morning and was brought to Statuary Hall. A small invitation-only ceremony was held there to comply with social distancing guidelines. Today's events come after a two-day public viewing at the Supreme Court. Ginsburg passed away 1 week ago today at the age of 87. She served on the country's highest court for 27 years and is known for her work on gender equality. Our Christina Ruffini reports from Washington.
Ready, step.
Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg's casket arrived on Capitol Hill, where she's the first woman to lie in state at the U.S. Capitol.
She does so on a catafalque built for Abraham Lincoln. May she rest in peace.
Justice Ginsburg is also the first Jewish person to lie in state. Rabbi Lauren Holtzblatt officiated the ceremony.
All the days of her life, she pursued justice, even in illness. She fought 5 bouts with cancer.
She talked about the many obstacles Justice Ginsburg faced in her life and how she viewed defeats, even in the court, as a path for a better future.
The greatest dissents do become court opinions, and gradually, over time, their views become the dominant view, so that the dissenters hope that they are writing not for today, but for tomorrow.
Only one other Supreme Court justice has been given this high honor. That was Chief Justice William Howard Taft, who was also the 27th President of the United States. Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden joined the Ginsburg family and members of Congress to celebrate her life and 27 years of service on the high court. She will be buried in a private ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery. Christina Ruffini, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
And for more, I want to bring in Lisa Beatty Frelinghuysen. She is a former law clerk for Justice Ginsburg, working with her on one of her landmark cases, United States versus Virginia. Welcome, Lisa. Great to have you with us. I know it has been an emotional few days for you. You were an honorary pallbearer for Justice Ginsburg. How was that experience?
That was a very moving experience, Tanya. Receiving the justice's casket and escorting it up to the court, up to her family, up through her family of clerks. It was really, you could feel the love and admiration on the court steps there as we went up to the courthouse.
And
I also,
as we mentioned earlier,
Sorry,
go ahead, Lisa.
I was going to say I also stood vigil in the evening by her casket, which was another extraordinary experience, despite the fact that there were hundreds of people coming across the plaza of the Supreme Court to pay their respects. It was serene and almost intimate, and you could feel, and the sense of gratitude I think that we all had was profound.
Indeed. And as we mentioned earlier, Lisa, you worked with Justice Ginsburg on her landmark 1996 decision involving the Virginia Military Institute, which did not allow female cadets despite that it got public funding. So tell us why the United States versus Virginia was such an important case and how Justice Ginsburg approached it.
Sure, that was a big landmark case, Tanya. You know, the school, VMI, had done everything it could to not have to admit women, including setting up a separate but equal program for women, which of course was not equal at all. The justice announced the standard that states needed to have an exceedingly persuasive justification in order to exclude women, and that was a quote that she had found from an O'Connor opinion that involved a nursing school that did not admit men. And so it was a nod to Justice O'Connor. It was a nod to the fact that these stereotypical notions about men and women and laws and programs that seek to discriminate against them are harmful to everybody. It was she had a 7-1 majority, so she had persuaded some of her more conservative colleagues, and it was a terrific decision.
Definitely. And then the two of you visited VMI many years later to see how the female cadets were working out. What did you find on that trip?
That was an amazing experience. We visited with both the first women cadets, who were so appreciative of the justice's work, and then the current cadets, who were just thriving. There were a lot of people who had predicted that it would be the end of VMI, and yet here were these women who were doing incredible things, studying nuclear physics, looking at water crises, so excited about embarking on their lives. And they thanked the justice for opening the doors to allow them to pursue their dreams. It was very heartwarming.
And the VMI was the last all-male public university in the U.S. It's now a case that is studied in constitutional, law classes all around the country. How does it feel to be part of that?
Well, look, I feel very honored, very lucky. She had been my hero. I had been very passionate about women's rights and reproductive rights. And so the opportunity to work with her on this big case was thrilling. It was also a bit nerve-wracking, but I learned a great deal from her. I learned about the importance of commitment and persistence and incremental steps toward establishing lasting change. She was extraordinarily thoughtful and careful in her writing, building consensus and bringing people along. So it was quite an experience.
Building consensus. That's what we often hear about Justice Ginsburg. And Lisa, for many women who consider Justice Ginsburg their champion, there is concern now over how their reproductive rights may be affected by her replacement. Can you talk to us about the importance Justice Ginsburg placed on this issue and what her views were?
Sure. Look, Justice Ginsburg understood that reproductive rights and access to those rights, so the ability for women of limited means to access those rights, were crucial to women's equality. Simply stated, women will never achieve equality without the ability to make decisions about whether and when to have children. I think she recognized that Roe v. Wade is a vulnerable decision. There are several reproductive rights cases making their way that are in the Federal Court of Appeals right now, making their way up to the Supreme Court. And some of those cases may squarely present Roe v. Wade. And we have a very different court now that sees that right differently. I think that the Justice and I often talked about what that might look like, reproductive justice, had it come up through an equality framework as opposed to a privacy framework, which is the way that case line developed. The equal protection is in the Constitution. That has been well established, largely thanks to Justice Ginsburg. And, it may have provided more solid footing for the protection of that extremely important right to women.
So she worried there was some vulnerability in that case. Now, Lisa, when did you last see Justice Ginsburg, and did she seem hopeful or worried about the significant legal challenges ahead for our country?
I last saw the Justice really at the start of COVID in March, or when COVID was around, right before quarantining. I saw her in March. I'd been to a reproductive rights case at the court, and we had a little visit in the afternoon. She was herself deeply engaged in the case, in her work as a justice. She was thoughtful and wise and loving as she always was. I think it's fair to say that she book, and she expressed it in her very powerful dissenting opinions, that she was concerned with the way the court was going. The court had lost its moderates. It was leaning toward the right. And, she began to really use that dissenting voice to speak to both Congress and the public about what was happening in a way that I think was
dissenting voice. Yeah, no, that dissenting voice that she became, almost a cultural icon for. Lisa, thank you so much. On a personal note, I just want to add that the late Judge Edmund Palmieri, the federal judge who gave Justice Ginsburg her first clerkship out of law school, is my husband's grandfather, something that we're very proud of here.
I know he's very thankful
for that job. Yes. Well, Lisa Beatty Frelinghuysen, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Tanya, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.